Hi, I'm Dr. Don Boomgaarden, President of St. Joseph's College, and I'd like to welcome you to St. Joseph's College, Living Our Mission. Built on tradition and founded by the Sisters of St. Joseph more than 100 years ago, we are a mission-driven institution that provides a strong academic, value-oriented education with growing diverse campuses located in Patchogue and Brooklyn, New York, as well as online. Thank you for joining us. In this program, we will discuss the theme of service and how the Office of Campus Ministry plays a vital role in our student life experience. I never cease to be amazed by how deeply committed our students are to serving others. Many of them spend their spring breaks rebuilding homes in disaster areas, their free time feeding the hungry in soup kitchens, and preparing for the holiday season by gathering toys for children who have very little. To speak more about this is Cristian Murphy, Director of Campus Ministry for SJC Long Island, and Sister Marie Mackey, Director of Campus Ministry for SJC Brooklyn. I'm so happy to have both of you here today. It's wonderful sometimes to have two campuses because I have two campus mission and ministry leaders. So this is terrific. And in other colleges, they just have one. So I have two. And each one of you brings a special approach, special talents, special experiences to this really important task. So, Sister Marie, I'm going to start with you and ask you about the experiences of being a sister and how your experiences of being a sister of St. Joseph have impacted your work with the students, and how do you bring those experiences into the activities and into the conversations that you have with the students?
Well, I think we start off with that concept of dear neighbor, and who is my neighbor? And so explain to the students that your neighbor is actually whoever is the closest to you. So on campus, it's the student sitting next to you or behind you or beside you. But it's also then who you might travel with on the subway. So the whole concept of neighbor is very expansive. So being a sister of St. Joseph and coming from a tradition where our early sisters were dividing the city to look for the needs and then doing whatever they could to alleviate those issues and problems in the city, bringing that to the students and helping them understand the concept of what it is to divide the city and how to look for where there are unmet needs.
I think one of the things about St. Joseph's, which a lot of people would find surprising, is that although we have all of these wonderful academic programs, wonderful degrees, certificates, graduate, undergraduate programs, our students are actually learning a lot about life outside of the classroom through the work that you're doing. So the conversation that you are describing with them, talking about the dear neighbor, is a conversation they might not have at another institution, but they would have at St. Joseph's College. And I think that's one of the things that sets us apart. When you are talking about that with the students, I'm sure there's some activities that you're working on with them. What are some of the activities that you do with them to focus on this?
Sure. Certainly during the past 2.5 years, we've really done a lot with the homeless that are in the areas of Brooklyn, especially Atlantic Avenue and down in downtown Brooklyn. So the students did a lot to make basically backpacks with a number of items for mostly homeless men, some women, during the winter months. So that was one activity. We also have a mission trip to what we call a backyard mission trip, which is to the Bread and Life Soup Kitchen, where the students learn more about what's happening literally in their own backyard. We have been doing cleanups. So during this time, we're still in COVID. It's in person, yet it's socially distant. So they have most recently cleaned out a playground that had been overgrown for the past 2 years for children at Immaculate Conception Catholic Academy, and we're getting new toys for their playground. They're doing some fun activities for young people. We're going to be celebrating Halloween, but then some very practical things like Thanksgiving food drives and Adopt a Family for Christmas, as well as the student food pantry, which many students are themselves in need.
And when the students do this with you, how do they change in terms of their demeanor and their understanding of the world through doing these kinds of things?
Well, I think there's we move from a sense of charity to justice and some theological reflection on why are people poor? Why is food and housing limited to so many people, especially in our city? So I think we go deeper when we have those times of conversation, and certainly there's always mealtime, whether it's breakfast or lunch in between, that we begin to talk about what's happening. A couple of years ago, we also took students to the Tenement Museum. So again, to get that sense of what it was like to be in New York over 100 years ago.
And that idea, though, of reaching out to the dear neighbor doesn't just mean charity, but it means we can learn something from the dear neighbor.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And they might not start out with that attitude, but once they start to do the activities that you're describing, they begin to see the dear neighbor as a real person who also has something to teach us.
And also for so many, especially in terms of the immigrant population, how hard they work to be able to support their families. And I think during COVID, we began to appreciate a lot of those workers who were in our supermarkets, that there are a lot of people out there who are doing everything that they can and take nothing for granted. And I think that's something that's important for our students to see.
And that touches on the Holy Father's edict of the year of St. Joseph, where he was talking about how St. Joseph is the ideal role model right now because it's the people just like that who helped us to survive the pandemic, and they're not in the newspaper, they're not on TV every day, but it's those people that have actually made it possible for us to survive.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Well, Cristian, tell me a little bit about what motivates and drives our students to serve others in Long Island.
Sure. I think it starts with the idea of the hunger and thirst for righteousness that our students feel. I always feel like the students they come to us just extremely hungry for more. And it starts with service, and it starts with this drive about maybe it's a specific idea, a specific topic that they're passionate about, and then expanding that into a bigger conversation about, well, why is this really bothering you? Why do you feel like there's something that needs to be done here? And it goes back to exactly that, the dear neighbor, and understanding that there's a hunger to get to know others in a deeper way. And so it always starts with that. Everything revolves around food, right? And that hunger. And then it branches off of there into greater things.
Now, when you're dealing with the students, for students who are coming to St. Joseph's, I think this is a universal issue. It's not just our students. It's sometimes difficult to get them involved in these kinds of activities. So what do you do to reach out to the students to get them involved? It's
so hard to get students involved right now. And I think it's a thing all colleges and universities and any place working with young people are facing right now because of the challenges of what we're up against. The biggest thing that I found with being successful with this is just personal interactions and personal invitations, and letting students see that what they think and what they dream can be possible. And in that process, once they see a couple students doing something and experiencing that joy, they'll start to all jump in. And it's really contagious. And that's all it takes, is just taking a couple students and saying, hey, this could be really special. You could be part of this. Join us. And then it just multiplies. It really does, because that joy is it's undefinable.
I think that's a good point, that sense of joy attracts energy.
100%.
And that sense of being close to God attracts energy. And you can kind of tell if what we're doing in life is the right thing by just the amount of energy that's being produced. If we find that we're sluggish or are depressed all the time, clearly we may not be doing the right thing. But I think it's an interesting characteristic of St. Joseph's College students that they themselves will come to me, the Student Government Association, for example, I'll say, well, how are things going? They'll say, well, we just wish the students would get more involved. And I smile a little bit because there's so much going on. And if they only knew, and I don't tell them this because I don't want to dampen the concern, but if you went to many other campuses, you would not see a tenth of activities involving service that you see here at St. Joseph. So it's a really important part of our life here. And you've done a wonderful job here on the Long Island campus. What are some of the activities that the students are involved in?
Thank you. Yes, many similar things to what Sister Marie said with regards to food drives and the Christmas and gifts and things of that nature. The biggest thing recently with regards to coming out of this pandemic and still being in it has been teaching students how to understand service to each other, the dear neighbor on campus, and taking those opportunities of enlightenment and learning as a group. We've been doing a lot more in the prayerful service of understanding how to prayerfully invite St. Joseph into our hearts, so that way we can individually start to do good, because we've been limited in actual acts of service. We haven't been able to do our mission trips as we normally do, which we will soon, right? So in doing that and teaching those ways of being, we then have been doing the food drives, the donations, different things of that. A couple of the clubs just did a really great Halloween basket donation opportunity for this past fall. So things of that nature, and just kind of getting that enlightenment going of how to be like Joseph.
And I think you touch on a good point that on both campuses we don't only have service activities that are kind of external and active, but we also have meditational activities and spiritual activities where we talk about the inner self, and we focus on that important spiritual side of ourselves, which is a key part of the St. Joseph's experience. So whatever the faith tradition of the student, they have a sense of being connected to something greater, something spiritual. Well, we have to take a quick break, but still to come, more about campus ministry and service at St. Joseph's College.
Are you ready?
To work together and stand out.
Ready?
To find solutions that push us forward.
Ready?
To take on today's challenges and take charge of our future. With a world-class education at St. Joseph's College in Patchogue, you will be ready. Attend an upcoming event to find out how. For scheduling information, visit sjcny.edu/LI events.
Are you ready?
St. Joseph's College.
Ready? Set?
Joe's.
Are you ready?
To work together and stand out.
Ready?
To find solutions that push us forward.
Ready.
To take on today's challenges and take charge of our future. With a world-class education at St. Joseph's College in Brooklyn, you will be ready. Attend an upcoming event to find out how. For scheduling information, visit sjcny.edu/BK events.
Are you ready?
St. Joseph's College.
Ready.
Set?
Joe's.
Welcome back to St. Joseph's College, Living Our Mission. We're going to continue exploring the themes of campus ministry and service and discuss some of the exciting projects on the horizon for the upcoming academic year. Before I do that, though, I want to talk to you both a little bit about what it was like for you to work with our students through the pandemic. We started in March of 2020 in the middle of the semester, and you'll remember that was the week right before spring break began. So, Sister Marie, what was that like for you? What were the experiences like for you and for the students at that time?
Well, I think the shift right away to online and trying to have office hours through Zoom, we were doing some book clubs with spiritual books that helped. But I think a lot of it was more one-on-one, trying to help students cope. I was also engaged in working with our students who needed funding, either for housing or food or tech help. So I was interacting a lot with the students, delivering food in some cases. So the student food pantry was well utilized.
And we set up a special emergency fund, a COVID emergency fund for the students. And that included aid, like technological aid. Perhaps they might need an iPad, they might need a computer, and many, many other things. They might need Wi-Fi. And that was an opportunity to kind of reach out to them. And in the conversations you had one-on-one, what was that like? What were some of the themes that entered into that?
Well, I think, first of all, an educational piece for me was a greater understanding of not only the diversity of our students, but the situations. There were a lot of our students who were from Nepal, were really stranded here, and there was no way to communicate or go back home. So I think hearing the stories, not only of desperation, but then the fact that the college was able to do something for them, just tremendous gratitude. So I think through that pandemic, I was able to have a more intimate relationship with a lot of our students that I probably would not have had because they might not have crossed the path of campus ministry.
And you point to an important fact that the campus of St. Joseph's College, Brooklyn, has a number of international students. And I taught a course in the fall of the pandemic year, and I actually had a student in Nepal who was taking the course from Nepal, but I also had taught previously in Brooklyn and had several students from Nepal. And so that's a special type of need that they often will have because they're already so far away from home, and this is a real challenge for them to live in that kind of environment.
And one of these students in the spring was doing some service with me, and we had lunch together, and he spoke about it had been 2 years since he had been home to see his family. Yeah. But then it was also a learning. He talked to me about his Buddhist religion and things that I served that he couldn't eat. So again, it was an education. But the pandemic did provide, I think, a deeper level of connection with some of the students that would not have happened under other circumstances.
And Cristian, would you say you had the same experience? What was your experience?
Yes, it was tough initially. The idea of just transitioning seemed really daunting, but you lose something and you gain other things. And it was such an interesting push and pull of a relationship of saying, oh, we can't go on our trip, we can't do this, we can't do that, but there's other ways to do it. So the first thing was connecting with the students and seeing who is in immediate need, who needs to be in contact with the most. And then from there, it gave us the opportunity to explore things we've always wanted to do. We were able to get, the students have always said we should have a podcast and a YouTube channel and do different things and conversations. And so we were able to explore that. And one of the semesters, we were able to do a whole showcase of all the seniors that were involved, that were graduating, and do these special interviews. And I'm really proud of those, and I'm so excited that through this difficult moment, we were able to find ways to show our students that we really want to capture what they've done for this school and build them up. And it was extremely validating for them and for me in a way that I never would have thought, along with also being able to still help. And we had a lot of donations that were coming in still. We were able to do everything, Christmas and Thanksgiving, and all throughout the year, all donations that we normally take in, we were able to do, and then some. So that didn't stop. So it was really remarkable what we could still do.
Well, the pandemic, I think for most of us, was a period of time where we felt rather alienated and alone. And so the work that both of you did to get the students involved in something outside of themselves and also to connect with others, I'm sure, was a real oasis for those students, right? And so that service work for them became an important focal point of their lives, maybe a much bigger part of their lives than it might be in a regular semester.
And the other, on the Brooklyn campus, because activities like retreats had been canceled, I had a lot of what I would call religious swag. And so although there were only 20% of students on campus, I set up a table and there was a theme to each week. So one was journaling as prayer. And I must have had out about 150 journals, and within a week they were gone. Another it was the month of the rosary, so it was the little rosary rings. So there were spiritual books that were out there. And so many, especially in the springtime, came into campus ministry to say, we know that a lot of activities were not able to happen, but by having that table, it was a connection that they had not been forgotten, and their spiritual needs, while not being met in the traditional ways, were being met in other ways. So that continues actually, and today. Yeah.
Well, there's an old German saying that eyes that have been washed by tears see more clearly. So those challenges, many of those young people saw deaths in their families, deaths of their loved ones. All of us experienced the pandemic in that way. Of course, the Sisters of St. Joseph were very much impacted by the pandemic. And so those really serious experiences turned service and the discussion of ministry, campus ministry, spirituality, into something that was much deeper, I think, than we would normally see on a campus. Not something we want to repeat,
no,
correct.
But in a sense, there was something valuable there, something valuable. Well, the students are now back on campus. What is the difference having them back on campus to the remote world of last year?
There's an eagerness that you can sense that they really are much more appreciative of what's on campus, and they're still kind of getting used to the experience of being back, and I could tell there's still some hesitance and being nervous about what they could do and also just getting back to balancing life. But within all their eyes, because that's all we can see, the eyes, right? Within their eyes, you could see that they really are open to getting to know people, and I've been so surprised by how like events that I would think that would normally be a success aren't as much of a success, but yet I feel like I'm talking to so many more students this year than I ever have before. And it's by different means, and there's just so many people who are just coming in and just wanting to have dialogues. So it's way more personal this year, which I personally love. But it's surprising me every single day.
And are your experiences similar? Or?
I would say they're similar. There's still some hesitancy, and so we're offering, again, in person, socially distant, but also remote. So a number of students are writing to Sisters of St. Joseph at our mother house. And by having those relationships, some of them are doing them online as well. But in talking to the students, you know, I said, the sisters there, they might not be able to always respond back to you because of their own health issues, but they're there to pray. So feel free to write to them about, you know, what it is you're studying, and maybe there are some personal issues in your own life. And so they are making connections, and I am getting responses back from the sisters about how wonderful it is to hear from the students, and the students excited that they've received a letter from the sister or they've received an email back. So I think the relationships, as Cristian said, they're coming about in different ways, and I think time will tell. I mean, I think we're still, you know, hesitant on certain things, but I think the on-ground things like mission trips, when that can be, you know, fully in fruit, we'll see a change on campus.
Well, there's no doubt it's a transition back to normalcy this semester. So I see that. I'm teaching this semester too, and my students are rather different from the students I taught before the pandemic. They're a little bit more guarded. They're a little bit more serious. I can tell they're preoccupied. They want to have, you know, a great relationship with the material. They want to reach out to one another, but at the same time, they've been through a very traumatic experience. And so I think, you know, we're trying to be gentle about that re-entry into the normal world. So what kinds of activities or plans, Cristian, do you have for your office here in Long Island the rest of the year?
Sure. So we're kind of taking a two-sided approach. We're developing things on campus that are very relaxed opportunities for students to come to events. Like we've been doing these coffee houses once a month, these little gatherings where we're just sort of trying to invite students to just be present. And then along with that, we're also doing our normal service operation, so to speak. And so we've been finding a lot of success in that, and that we're having a lot of students who are coming and wanting to hang out, have a cup of coffee, come to a very relaxed and formal gathering, get to know people, pray together. And then we are preparing now to do our big fall donation run. We're going to be working with Wyandanch Homes and Property Development, who is an organization that we've been working with for many years now, but the pandemic created a bond. Again, God surprises us in interesting ways. The pandemic formed this bond between us and that organization that is so powerful now, and we were able to give so much to them, and they gave so much to us spiritually. And so we're going to be providing 28 families with Thanksgiving food this year and Christmas gifts, and so we're getting ready for that now, and it's going to be really, really exciting.
Fantastic. And sister?
And we're having dinner and discussions, again, in that same spirit of getting people more comfortable. And we are strengthening a partnership with Catholic Charities of Brooklyn and Queens. Same thing in terms of food donations and Christmas gifts and other ways that our students might be able to help out at food pantries, because there are mostly elderly people doing the volunteer work in food pantries, and that it can't be sustained.
Well, I want to thank both of you for talking to me today about the work that you're doing. I want to thank both of you for the incredible work that you're doing, and for the depth and the spiritual viewpoint that you're bringing to our students, and the opportunity you're giving to them to develop themselves as complete people, as whole human beings. St. Joseph's is all about educating the whole person, and this is an important part of the educational process. Thank you for joining us today, and thank you all for watching St. Joseph's College Living Our Mission. The commitment of our students and the St. Joseph's community is a constant inspiration to me, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to witness all the good that they accomplish. We can all take a lesson from our students and the Sisters of St. Joseph and help our neighbors in need. Thank you for watching.